This year I decided I needed to go back to reading fiction. Stories are kind of soul food, aren't they? And once upon a time, I really loved to read. I was a complete bookworm in school and even in my early university years. I always had a novel tucked under my arm. But then something changed. I think I got into binge watching, and if I did pick up a book, it was mainly non-fiction, like something theology related, study related. All of that was available, but it's not quite the same as the joy of getting lost in story. I missed it. It also felt like, as an aspiring author, I should have been reading fiction. It's something which is really shaping your taste and your writing. So this August, I went to the library and thought, okay, let's just start with something. Let's start simple. So the first book I picked up on this whole let's get back to reading fiction journey was the Coffinmaker's Garden by Stuart MacBride, and I simply took it from the shelf because I always loved detectives, and I think it wasn't the smartest choice to ease myself back into reading, but it looked like a solid mystery novel, so I went for it. And it was a solid mystery novel. The setup is wild. A massive storm is literally eating away at the coast of a small Scottish town, and in the process it uncovers the buried bodies of a long dead serial killer, which means a detective and his team, they need to jump into investigation and dig into secrets that were buried. It's dark, bloody, and very Scottish. And I will say this, MacBride is a great writer. The plot is strong, the dialogues has this raw, sharp bite, and I had fun trying to figure out all the Scottish slang along the way. He nails that windswept, rainy, gloomy, small Scottish town vibe perfectly. Though I've realized it may not be quite my thing, because here's the thing. Every single character feels broken, like not just a little flawed, everyone is damaged in some big way, which of course is part of the point. It's what gives the book its mood, but for me it got a little heavy. It also has some pretty bloody, pretty grim scenes, and after a while I realized this genre probably isn't really down my aisle. So if you love your crime novels dark, gloomy, storm-lashed, with damaged detectives and plenty of gallows humor, this is right up your alley. I mean, I also love dark detectives, but that was a bit too much for me. Yeah. Next book we're going to talk about is The Impossible Us by Sarah Lotz. Honestly, I only grabbed it because of the cover. I was already holding MacBride in the library, and then I saw this bright, quirky looking thing and I thought, like, why not? I think I will need something lighter after this detective. It's not your typical romance. It's tender and witty. It's full of sharp dialogue, real messy characters, and lots of dogs. The plot is about two people meet through an email glitch and they realize they might just be soulmates. The problem is they live in different universes. And it's not quite a spoiler because everyone mentions it. So at first this little element of sci-fi put me off because I'm not a sci-fi reader, but it actually works. And I think that's the beauty of it. You have to kind of suspend your disbelief and just go with it, still just go with it as a romance book. And what I really loved is that the characters are, as I said, messy and mature. They're not the kind of polished, aspirational rom-com leads. They're not people you would look at on the streets, I don't know, look at the real life and think, oh wow, you are so amazing. They're just real, they're flawed, sometimes too flawed. And that's what made the romance so believable for me and so satisfying. Also realized something about myself with this book. I love the epistolary genre, when the whole thing is told through diary entries or emails or letters, and I eat this up, and I think it's really my thing because I felt the same with the other book, which I'm going to speak about later. Now I have to emphasize the writing of this book. English is my third language, as you know, so I started keeping a little list of words and phrases I didn't know before, like, I don't know, sad old git or banter. Yes, I didn't know the word banter before, and now I love it. Then diverting. Now instead of saying, oh, it's interesting, I'm gonna say, oh, how diverting. Subterfuge, overly jaunty. Also, like little lines like he was hovering over her spark, or the nucleus of my little studio. I think it was just so beautiful and not something you often meet in modern books. And maybe I'm bothering you with all these stultifying details about this book, but man, I loved it. It was like meeting a friend, coming across something you really loved, and it just that special feeling which happens when you're bored with a story. It was like collecting little treasures as I read. And it actually makes sense because Sarah Lotz is a screenwriter, and you can feel it in the sharpness of her dialogues and the way she just presents the scenes, how she sprinkles in these cinematic references. There are actually so many of those, even notes to David Bowie. It's really tasty, like she's sneaking movie flashes, culture flashes into a book. So Impossible is funny, clever, emotional, hopeful, and unique. If you like unconventional love stories, epistolary novels, or just want something that makes you laugh, I highly recommend. Yeah. I have to mention that there was completely no system in the way I was picking up the books. It was just, oh, I like the cover. Oh, I think I've heard about that. Oh, I think I loved the genre before. With this book, I just went to the shelf with new arrivals and it caught my eye. That's it. And only later I found out that it's actually an award-winning book. And we're talking about James, but Percival Everett. And I'll be honest, I'm still not sure how I feel about this book. I would really love to talk to people who maybe feel the same like me. And I don't know, maybe this is the point. There's so much pain and absurdity and injustice, and all of it is woven into the story, but it's told in this almost light, childlike tone. And I think this contrast is deliberate to make the horror even starker in the hindsight. But while I could see the horror once I stopped and thought about it, I didn't feel it in the moment. Like I had to bring myself back to like, what did I just read? Or like later on. The prose is smooth, maybe too smooth. It didn't stop me in my tracks the way I expected an award-winning novel would. And I'm happy to say that maybe that's part of the brilliance. The violence and injustice James lives with were contrast, normalized and unspoken, and there was no space to pause, to live it through, to realize what's going on. There was no luxury of reflection, and even noticing your own pain could be dangerous. You just endure it. And that made me think the anger we feel now when we read about that neglect, that erasure, that's a modern luxury. James and those around him, they didn't get to stop and rage. They just kept moving. And Everett seems to respect that by not dramatizing or, okay, heavy word, aestheticizing, like making it aesthetic, yeah, the pain. He just shows it briefly and moves on. Maybe that's genius. That's the reason why he won this award. But at the same time, I found myself emotionally distant. If James was meant to be so observant and educated, why did I feel like his voice kept me at arm's length? And so, yeah, I left in this space of uncertainty. I still don't know what to think about this book. I'm admiring what Everett did, but not entirely connecting to it. And maybe that's exactly what the book wanted me to feel. Anyway, let's move to the next book, which was again completely random library pick. I just saw the book, checked the rating on the Goodreads, and it's Other People's Husbands by Elisabeth Noble, another British author. I seem to have love relationship with them. This one is about a group of 6 friends. We meet them after 20 years of friendship, and then something happens that shakes them all. 2 of them have an affair. The book is about how that single incident triples a whole lot of other incidents, how it ripples through everyone's lives, the consequences, and the quiet ways relationships are tested. Noble writes about very simple things in a very simple way, but her language is beautiful. Honestly, yeah, British authors again deserve a special mention. Maybe just so for me, the metaphors she uses to describe emotions are very short but rich. Like there was something, a balloon in the rib cage of sadness, a hum of loneliness, and I had to pause again and write so many of them down. The story itself has a kind of even tempo. It's not a roller coaster of emotion. Don't expect like high drama and twists at every turn. It actually takes a little while to get into it, especially because this book has a large cast, and it did take me a moment to figure out who is who. But once you settle in, you sort of feel like an observer, and I actually realized that I like that kind of story. Not slow exactly, just steady without the big dramatic peaks and twists. I am someone who is, even in the movies, whenever I sense that, oh, here comes the big emotional blow up before the resolution, I physically want to curl into a ball and just skip it. I don't know, I don't like drama, so I appreciated the gentler pace here. And still, it surprised me by making me cry more than once. There's guilt, grief, shame, love, anger, and so much more woven into these ordinary lives. That said, not everything worked for me. There are a lot of characters, it's 6 friends, 6 couples, six friend couples, and some feel unnecessary. The male figures in particular are quite flat. I couldn't for the life of me understand why that female character fell for that male character. That whole love affair at the center of the story honestly felt unconvincing, but actually maybe it wasn't the center of the story. Maybe that was the point. Maybe it was meant to be a great love, but just it wasn't meant to be a great love, but just the temptation of one. Something fragile, something fleeting, and this is why they also portrayed it this way. What I really appreciated is that the book didn't go down the predictable, let's destroy the cheetah path. Brokenness and consequences, yes, but there was also this delicately intertwined grace. I also could have done without Mia and Will's storyline. I know there's a kind of comparison, like, oh, young love and all things possible, but I didn't really needed it. Overall, I think given how much I've been yapping about this book, I actually liked it, and enough that I will definitely check out more of Elisabeth Noble's work. One thing for sure, I wanted to step into fiction relying mostly on luck. Okay, maybe I did do a quick peek at the Goodreads rating, but still the goal was to wander into genres I usually avoid. And things like family drama, teenage protagonists, they were always big red flags for me. I always thought, like, isn't there enough drama around us? Isn't there enough broken families? Also, I'm not so fond of my teenagehood years memories. So Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth wasn't my natural pick, and yet here we are. So the girls, Jessica, Nora, and Alicia, or Alicia, I'm not sure, have spent their life being told that they were fortunate to meet at Wild Meadows, a foster home owned and run by a single woman named Miss Fairchild. The 3 girls have remained close as sisters ever since their 2 years at that house. Unfortunately, everything others thought about their idyllic childhood was a lie. Miss Fairchild was an emotionally abusive and cruel foster mother. She was cold and calculating, and she knew really well. She knew exactly how to hurt each of the girls. She knew what they wanted the most, and she knew how to take it from them. It's been 25 years since they thought they freed themselves from Miss Fairchild and Wild Meadows. But when they learned that a body was discovered underneath the house, which was demolished, they find themselves at the center of this investigation, and all the memories rise up, and that's what the story is about. The book got me only once I was probably halfway in. At first it felt like author was working extra hard to dump info anyway on us about how different and particular and peculiar the sisters are. But once I settled in, I read smoothly, and Hepworth balances the pacing well. She is layering the reveals bit by bit. The twists are strong. I would say that I could not predict them. Maybe I'm not so good with predicting them. And yet, yeah, there also was some really good humor and lots of things which make you think, mostly about childhood and children and just how vulnerable they are. They believe everything we tell them. Like, there was a scene which really made me cry when Jessica, the first girl, there's a flashback of hers when she was told that her biological mother is gone, from being very sad, as the social workers phrased it. Jessica receives the news. She's trying to smile because she doesn't want to be gone too. I really cried here. I cried to the desperate need to be loved by someone, and how this desire to be loved often ties us to the wrong people. That said, reading about child abuse is never easy. Some chapters were hard to push through, leaving me with that helpless, burning rage that such things still exist in our world. Spoiler alert, I really appreciated that the ending, this massive twist which everyone is speaking about, this ending doesn't soften Holly's monstrosity. There's no excuse making, but she was also abused, so it's understandable. Hurt people hurt people. She is what she is, and the story holds her accountable. And I think this was something which made me really love the book. The next book I picked up, it was I Will Judge You by a Bookshelf by Grant Snider. This one was just pure sweetness. Obviously, I couldn't walk past it in the library. Nothing heavy, just fun and little giggles of recognition, like catching yourself nodding along the familiar quirks. It's smart, it's playful, and it's a kind of book you would give to a fellow book lover just to say, look, this is us, or someone who is aspires to write a book. So I would just highly recommend it to any book lover. It's funny, it's clever, it's just very cool. The next book I picked was How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin. I picked this one because it had been sitting on my Pinterest board forever, proof that Pinterest does work, right? And as a long-time detective story lover, I just thought, why not? Turns out it was my very first cozy mystery, apart from, I don't know if authors like Agatha Christie considered to be cozy mystery authors. Yeah, and yes, it's not perfect, but I really liked it. The opening hooked me right away, and by the time I admitted to myself that I do love a good whodunit with subtle hints of romance, I was fully in. The setup felt fresh, the writing carried a surprising beauty, and those flickering little romance scenes, this was just yum for me. It was delicious. So now I know some people might complain that the investigative side of the book is not perfect, is not as strong, and Annie, as someone aspiring to write detectives, and she's the one who aspires to solve a murder, she makes quite a few silly mistakes, and towards the end of the book there's just maybe lots of uncertainty why things go particular ways. But honestly, I didn't mind that. I'm not usually super heavy on following every single bit of logic of an investigation. I just wanted to enjoy the ride, and the book delivered it to me. In that sense, it totally did. So the pace lagged a little toward the end, and a few later dialogues lost their spark. I didn't feel the same strong way about them as in the beginning. It's not full 5-star for me. But Annie, I loved her character. Her inner monologues had me just smiling. I loved the sentence, that's a future Annie problem, and I adored her pushbacks and conversations. I think I also have a low-key confession to make. I was really obsessed with Frances and Ford's storyline, and I would love to read the book about them. In fact, I love these diary entries of the book far more than the book itself. The next book I read this month was Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield. This book was also part of my Pinterest finds. I just loved the cover and the fact that it was called a fairy tale for grown-ups. Magic realism is something I used to enjoy a lot. So there's no wonder I picked up that book. 15 minutes after I finished Once Upon a River, I made a note on my app that it feels like I'm still drifting along this gentle river. It's slow, it's unhurried, and it's utterly absorbing. It's not a book you read quickly or lightly. It's a text to savor, a story that demands time and attention, and you do listen to it like to a long legend or a fairy tale. In simple words, it's a story about stories and life, how we perceive and navigate our reality, how we interpret things which happen, how we make sense of them, how we speak to others about them. This is a mystery story that starts in the Swan on the night when a man, half drowned and bleeding from his wounds, staggers in from the river carrying a dead little girl in his arms. A dead little girl who later wakes. A little girl who, although pale and mute and a stranger, triggers in others a strong need to protect and cherish her. Alongside this main theme, we open quite a few of other stories. Some are happy, some are hard, but they all unique and undoubtedly touching. Some nearly made me hate them or actually hate them, but some I've listened to with catching my breath, like Rita's and Photographer's story. The characterization of this book is just brilliant, and I need to have it on my shelf just to peek in and to meet someone as a good acquaintance. Reading it reminded me a lot of Dickens, and I know that people compare it to Dickens a lot, to this old traditional writing style, the atmosphere, the care for human relationship, the way every detail feels deliberate. And I've realized that my mind has gotten used to breezier stories lately, so it took a little effort to sink into this one, but once I did, it felt like meeting an old friend I've missed without even knowing it, and I'm sure lots of us can relate. The language is rich and precise, it's full of texture, it's full of nuance. If you love classic literature and that sense of the vibe it brings, you will probably find it very satisfying. It's like deeply satisfying. But if you usually read faster, modern, American style novels, it might feel a bit slow and measured. And I know that people complained about that in reviews. In short, it's a beautiful meditative read that lingers long after the last page, just as the river flow. And the final book of the August was Matt Haig's The Midnight Library. And funny enough, I have never heard about this book. I know apparently now when I read to watch other people reviews on it, that it made a big noise on TikTok and it was one of the most sold books in the bookshops. And I just liked the cover and the name. The fact that the library mentioned there was enough for me to pick it up. And it just, yeah, funny how ignorant I was. I agree with the people who criticize this book for being a little bit too simplistic in the message it delivers. Like it's a bit of a self-help message wrapped in a fiction form. And yet I did enjoy the simple message. And I think it rang some important bells in my heart. I do think that our world is obsessed with constant reinvention and self-optimization, and Haig dares to remind us that wonder is not in chasing, but in noticing, that beauty is in these ordinary moments of life. Maybe the style of language is not revolutionary, but the theme is still good, and I loved the whole library setup. It really did the trick for me. The novel speaks against the culture of blame, which I think we are falling in a lot on parents, spouses, circumstances, and instead suggests that often it's our own perspective that traps us in misery. I loved the way it highlighted how flashes of beauty and wonder shine brightest against the background of struggle, rivalry, and ache. This is something you just cannot separate from one another. That simple truth resonated deeply with me, especially given that recently I've been reflecting on this a lot. That life doesn't need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. Life doesn't need to be perfectly comforting and happy in order to be meaningful. So that said, I did find myself wishing for more of Nora's inner reflections. While her journey from multiple possible lives was an effective narrative device, at times I felt a bit bogged down by descriptions of her roles, appearances, the external situations. By the middle of the book, I grew less engaged with the repetition of another life. In fact, I felt tempted to skip it, and I longed for deeper dives into her interior world, her thoughts, how she came to particular conclusions and realizations and self discoveries. So that was my August in books, my little journey back into fiction. From the dark, stormy streets of the Coffinmaker's garden to the tender, witty emails of Impossible Us. It's funny how much reading can feel like a conversation. Sometimes messy, sometimes comforting, sometimes challenging, but always rewarding. I feel like I've dipped back into a part of myself I've neglected, that bookworm who could get lost for hours in a story and come out of it changed with new dreams, new perspectives, or at least a little fuller. This month reminded me why I fell in love with fiction in the first place, why I fell in love with books. Stories are soul food, and I can't wait to see what September brings. I would love to hear what was the last book you read, what impressed you, what are your plans for the next month. And until the next letter, yours, S.